On WhatsApp, your personal messages stay private, between you and whoever you send them to. So things like the passport numbers for your honeymoon stay between you and your fiancé. And that video call for your grand's 80th stays in the family. Even your streaming password stays between you and your college roommates, who still ask for it every week in your group chat. Because on WhatsApp, your personal messages are yours. No one else can see or hear them, not even us. WhatsApp, message privately.
Welcome to the OnThePen podcast with your host, Dave Knapp.
Welcome to the Tuesday, July 15th edition of On the Pen, the weekly dose podcast. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I am here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro's at Bound, Compound. That pen, it's what we talk about each and every week here at On the Pen, the weekly dose. It's such a pleasure to be here with you each and every week. We got a lot of great information to get into this week, including a major announcement for an upcoming event that we will be holding here in Washington, D.C. in just a week, about a week and a half. And so I want to tell you about that, but we've got a ton to get into. So let's just jump right into it. This week, we've got some very interesting news this past week out of the state of Connecticut. So if you followed our Substack at obesity.news, that's all you have to type into your browser is obesity.news. You can put your email in, and then you're just going to get the articles that we publish, the newsletter that we put together multiple times a week for you to bring you the breaking news. You got to sign up there. And we covered this article a little bit earlier in this week, and it's just a fascinating story. And I'm really curious to hear from you, the community, what your thoughts are on this. So Connecticut passed a law that could completely change the game when it comes to the affordability of, forget GLP-1, just prescription drugs in general. So tucked into a bipartisan prescription drug affordability bill was a line that got almost no national coverage. Amazingly so, perhaps because of maybe who controls maybe the media in our country in terms of who spends the most marketing dollars with them. But yeah, we didn't get a lot of national coverage, which is why you follow On the Pen. But it could blow the lid off of patents for drugs in this country. So the law sets the stage for Connecticut to basically petition the federal government to let them bypass drug patents. And this would include, obviously, patents for GLP-1. So in plain English, they want to make their own GLP-1s. That's what they want to do. Governor Ned Lamont signed a bill this past week. And inside it was basically a mandate for the state of Connecticut to look at and study if they can centralize drug contracts, basically get into purchasing agreements with other states to purchase generics in bulk. And it also includes like a drug discount card program, all these sort of things to help look at the cost of overall spending. And according to a TikTok that was put out by the Connecticut Democrats, essentially they had concluded that Connecticut as a state pays over $150 million a year for Ozempic alone. And you know that Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries are often not included in coverage for obesity medicine. That's what Treat and Reduce Obesity Act is working on that we've been covering in terms of Medicare. But Medicaid is kind of hit or miss with coverage for obesity. But this is sort of the big thing baked into this bill is that there is an old code within some sort of archaic federal laws that basically allow states to circumvent drug patents if it is in the interest of the patients that the state is in charge of. So essentially, if you think about it this way, basically these states can petition the federal government to say, hey, we want to circumvent this drug patent because we have a medical need within our state that precipitates basically bypassing that patent. So they're going to ask the federal government, they're going to petition the Trump administration to let them invoke this power so that they can partner with a manufacturer and produce basically compounded GLP-1s themselves. This has never been done by a state. Louisiana once threatened to do it. North Carolina flirted around with the idea of doing it several years ago, but Connecticut actually put this into law. It is signed into law in their state. And so this isn't like lobbying. This isn't, political blowhardedness. This is actually a state passing a law, signing it into legislation, and they will now petition the federal government to be able to make generic GLP-1s. And this could force a reckoning in the cost and accessibility and have ripple effects throughout the country for GLP-1 medications. Now, this is where I'm sort of curious to hear from you, because obviously Lilly and Novo are not going to take this sitting down. They're going to fight this tooth and nail. They're going to unleash a lobby or unleash an army of lobbyists to fight back against this. But let's just play this out. Let's say this works. And the precedent is set for basically a state to circumvent drug patents because they're too expensive for that state to afford and too many patients need them. What does that do ultimately to sort of the sanctity of drug patents, which some argue are what protects the innovation of drugs in the United States and around the world? Is that we have this sort of free market system where the drug companies can make as much money as they want off a drug, essentially at least as much as the insurance companies are willing to pay for. And this would sort of upend that. And so do you feel like this would stifle innovation? Is that kind of your take on it? Or do you feel like it's time for something radical to change because the problem is radical? I'm really curious because I have mixed feelings about this and mixed feelings about the potential implications of drug innovation, especially as it relates to chronic disease, not just obesity, but all chronic diseases. And so I just think that this is a very interesting move by the state of Connecticut to actually force a reckoning when it comes to the accessibility of obesity treatments. And this is one that we'll be watching very closely here at OnThePen. And if you've been following our Substack, you got that a little earlier in the week. So it's been interesting to hear some of the community's sort of takes on what's going on in that world. Hey, I want to just take a moment to thank our sponsors, Ro. Ro brings us the podcast every week. They've been such a wonderful sponsor here for OnThePen. They have a program called the Ro Body Program. Listen, if you're looking to get access to obesity care, look no further than our partners at Ro, a wonderful, wonderful team of excellent people who care deeply about people living with the chronic disease of obesity and helping them to get treatment. Their program, the Ro Body Program, actually helps patients lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year when coupled with lifestyle modifications and the GLP-1 medications where appropriately prescribed. So if you're looking for treatment for your obesity, I hope you'll give our partners at Ro a look. Ro.co, ro.co/OTP will take you to the website where you can get all sorts of information, not only about the Ro Body Program, but even within a couple clicks, information about GLP-1s, potential side effects that you may incur if you decide to jump on a treatment for your obesity. So thank you to Ro, our sponsors. What a wonderful group of people they are. And I'm so thankful that they bring us this podcast each and every week. Moving along in the news this week, there's actually a kind of a study that flew under the radar towards the end of June that I picked up this past week. And you're not hearing about this anywhere right now, but this is one of the more fascinating pieces of information to come out about GLP-1. So we hear constantly in terms of sort of the secondary benefits of GLP-1. Obviously, people talk about weight loss. That's the biggest thing, or treating type 2 diabetes. But one of the more recent topics has been how these medications impact heart health, right? And so many people go, well, if you lose weight, obviously your heart is going to get healthier. That's just common sense. Well, actually, it's more than that, or potentially is more than that. And this study kind of helps show us. So to sort of rewind, if you look at the longest study ever for semaglutide, which was the select trials for Wegovy, and it was looking at heart disease, essentially people with heart failure. And in this study, it was a 4-year study, like I said. One of the big takeaways that we learned in this study was that regardless of how much weight you lost on semaglutide, and regardless of what dose you were on, because this was one of those where people weren't forced to escalate to the highest dose, so not everybody lost a proportional amount of weight. But regardless of the dose that you were taking, and regardless of the amount of weight that you lost, the reduction in all-cause mortality was reduced, right? So we knew that there was some additional mechanism that was working in these folks with heart failure that was helping them to live longer. So in steps this study from the University of the College of London and the University of Bristol. And while it hasn't been peer reviewed yet, it is offering some potentially really unique insights into why maybe you're getting an additional benefit from semaglutide. So they tested over 30 hearts in various conditions in rodent models. And so these were genetically modified mice. And what they found wasn't just interesting. It actually rewrites what we thought about GLP-1 and heart protection. It turns out that they're not just shrinking waistlines and helping people lose weight. They're opening up the blood vessels that would otherwise be clamped shut after a heart attack. So let's get into this a little bit. So after a heart attack, doctors work really hard to open up, the main blocked arteries. But what they don't always talk about, what you don't always hear about, is something that happens called no reflow. And that's actually when the main artery opens back up, but the blood still can't get to the tiny little vessels in your heart that actually feed your heart tissue with oxygen. So it affects up to half of heart attack patients. And when it happens, the outcomes get worse. There's more tissue damage in the heart, there's worse recovery, and there's a higher risk of death. So what causes it is there's these tiny cells called parasites, and they clamp down on the capillaries, and they basically choke off blood flow even after the main blockage is cleared. So there's hidden damage going on that people aren't understanding when that heart attack happens and they open that artery. So researchers have now shown in this study that GLP-1, the same hormone that is mimicked by semaglutide, or I believe in this trial was actually exenatide, the first GLP-1, that it can actually relax those parasites. So if you think of them like a gate on the surface, then there's these KATP channels, they're called. They're tiny proteins on the surface of these cells, and they clamp down, right? But when GLP-1 hits those cells, these gates open up, the cells relax, and the blood starts to flow to these capillaries again. So think of it kind of like flipping a breaker on a jammed valve inside your heart's plumbing. This opens it back up. So what's wild is in some of these rodents, they actually blocked the GLP-1 receptors in the study. And this protective effect of opening up those KTP channels vanished. So it seems to be that it was the GLP-1 that opened them up. So it gets even better, because this is like heart attack patients, right? So you're like, well, what if I haven't had a heart attack? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for heart health? So even without a heart attack in these rodents, GLP-1 still helped. In another set of experiments that they ran, they mimicked low oxygen conditions. So whenever you have a huge exertion of energy, right, your heart actually, kind of goes into this mode where it's, working to get good oxygen and good blood flow to your heart. So they mimicked sort of the extreme low oxygen condition of having a blocked artery, and found the GLP-1 could actually reverse damage after the fact, not by removing plaque or removing the blockage, but by restoring microcirculation in the heart. So this isn't theoretical, because we've actually seen this in the Wegovy trial. We've seen the benefit of this drug outside of weight loss and outside of, being on a high dose of Wegovy. We've seen the benefit. Now we may have sort of an answer as to what exactly that mechanism is. And this study could be a huge game changer. Again, it has to be peer reviewed. This is just a preprint study, but if they can replicate this once it's peer reviewed, I think this could be an absolute game changer. And I'm starting to not be impressed anymore by the amount of, I shouldn't say I'm not starting to be, I'm ceasing to be impressed. I'm starting to not be surprised by any level of good information that comes out about this. And the more I get into this, the more I'm convinced that our gut microbiome, where all these endogenous, our naturally occurring hormones exist, have been just decimated by the standard American diet, by toxins that we're exposed to in environment, by genetics. All these things sort of work together to dysregulate these naturally occurring hormones. And these GLP-1 analogs come along, and they simply mimic and bring regulation back to what was once dysregulated. And it's amazing. Your body starts to work right again. And that is, sort of my working theory about, how this all kind of comes together. These medications are an absolute game changer to a country that is just ravaged by the diseases of obesity and type 2 diabetes, metabolic disorder. And again, I'm just not surprised to see all these cascading benefits from these medications. And on that topic, a little one for the boys. But before we do that, I want to thank another sponsor that we have here in our podcast, which is Claimable. Now, if you are on a GLP-1 medication and you've recently been denied access to that GLP-1 medication by your pharmacy benefits managers, we could go on a whole tangent about pharmacy benefit managers, could we not? But if you've been denied recently, Claimable steps in with a solution that helps you fight back against the insurance companies. It helps you to basically utilize their platform to build a medical case, a strong medical and a strong legal case for you to get that medicine back. And about 80% of patients who use Claimable actually are effective in getting their medication covered again by their insurance. So Claimable, you can check them out at getclaimable.com/OTP. Again, that's getclaimable.com/OTP. If you use the code OTP10, you save 10% off their minimal, their fee is $40. Listen, if you can get $1,000 medication covered again by having a successful claim through Claimable, I think that's well worth the money spent, and you can save 10% by using code OTP10. So thank you to our friends at Get Claimable, who are helping people to stay on their treatments for their chronic disease. So on the topic of all the cascading benefits is another really great piece of information that came out this week. It was from NBC, an article that NBC did. So this is a big one for the guys in the audience. And I realize that about 65-70% of you are not guys, but many of you have husbands or guys that you love. So this is an interesting topic. So new research presented at Endo 2025, which is an endocrinologist convention that's going on right now, shows that GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Mounjaro may naturally boost testosterone in men with type 2 diabetes or obesity. And I don't just mean a synthetic boost. This isn't TRT or replacement therapy. These men were in their 50s, many with clinically low or normal testosterone. And after 18 months of GLP-1s, most of them hit normal testosterone levels without any testosterone replacement. Now, the boost wasn't as dramatic as you'd see with testosterone therapy, but it happened naturally. And according to the lead author of the study suggests that the body may be recovering its normal hormone production as weight comes down and insulin resistance improves. So the translation is that weight loss might be helping your brain and testicles to start talking again, to restore that connection. Right. And we just talked about how these medications are, I believe, helping to people's bodies to just function normally again. So here's the catch. This was a retrospective study. So it didn't prove that the medications caused testosterone increase. And it didn't test what happened if somebody went off the medication. But the implications are huge. If testosterone levels go up with weight loss, doctors may need to rethink how aggressively they prescribe testosterone replacement therapy, and they maybe how much they need to approach things from the obesity and diabetes management side of things, potentially for people who would benefit maybe more from GLP-1 therapy than this artificial TRT stuff, which has become wildly popular. So doctors are also warning about the risks of unnecessary testosterone therapy, stuff like blood clots and prostate issues, shrunken testicles, and reduced sperm counts. So the idea that we can support this hormone without jumping straight to just supplementing it might be worth paying attention to. So this is an amazing development, as are, virtually everything we talk about each week here, but some really positive news this week in terms of what these medications have to offer to patients who are living with the chronic disease of obesity, and just the amazing things that start to happen once we treat that disease. Can I get an amen in the comments? So thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do. Want to make a huge announcement here. You can pop over to OnThePen.com/Topgolf. We will be putting on an event not this coming Friday, but the next. So Friday, July 25th from 3:30 to 5:30 at the Topgolf right outside of Washington, D.C. We're going to provide, OnThePen is going to provide food, golf, and community. We're going to do this. The spaces are limited. So if you're attending the Your Weight Matters conference for the Obesity Action Coalition is putting on in Washington, D.C., we would invite you to come and spend some time with us in DC. Again, the event is limited because we are covering the cost, so we don't have an unlimited supply of money. But thanks to those who support OnThePen through our work at at obesity.news, and they sign up to be Substack subscribers at $12.99 a month or $125 a year. You get additional articles that we don't post anywhere else, and you get all the newsletters that we post. You get that delivered directly to your inbox. So thanks to them, and thanks to their support, and thanks to the support of partners like Row and Claimable, we're actually able to give back to the community on this event, and I'm really excited to do so. So you can go to onthepen.com/Topgolf, and you can get to this article. I'll also drop it in my link tree, which will be linked in the show notes of the podcast. Will be linked on the YouTube video as well. So make sure you go into the description of the video and check out the link tree. We'll link it there. But I hope that many of you will be able to join us. I hope to be able to get to meet some of you in person. I will be joining up a couple of other creators. We'll be doing a meet and greet, and I'll be joining them. I believe if I can work it out, I'll be joining the Downsized crew. They'll be doing a little meet and greet. I hope to be able to join them too. So I'm really looking forward to the Your Weight Matters conference this year. Hope you're attending. If not, we'll have other opportunities available for you to get out and for us to meet and chat. But for those of you who are attending the Your Weight Matters conference, we'd like to invite you to come along. Spaces are limited. Check it out. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do at On The Pen. I couldn't, wouldn't, and shouldn't do it without you. Until next time, we'll catch you.